What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to discover the host has a hidden agenda that threatens to destroy his reputation? Tonight, we're diving into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history, where Samuel L. Jackson found himself face-to-face with a host who seemed determined to humiliate him on live television. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think really happened here, because this story has layers that will blow your mind. The studio lights were blazing hot that evening as Samuel L. Jackson made his way onto the Jimmy Kimmel live set. The audience erupted in their usual enthusiastic applause, completely unaware they were about to witness television history. Jackson, dressed in his signature sharp black suit, waved to the crowd with that characteristic cool confidence that had made him a legend. He settled into the guest chair with the ease of someone who had done this dance 1,000 times before. "Samuel L. Jackson, everybody," Kimmel announced, with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm, though there was something slightly off about his smile, something that didn't quite reach his eyes. The two men shook hands, and Jackson noticed immediately that Kimmel's grip lingered just a moment too long, almost like he was trying to assert some kind of dominance. "Great to have you back on the show, Sam," Kimmel said, settling behind his desk. "It's been, 3 years since you were here last?" "Something like that," Jackson replied, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly tone that audiences loved. "Always good to be here, Jimmy." But as the interview began, something felt different. Kimmel wasn't asking the usual softball questions about upcoming projects or funny stories from movie sets. Instead, he seemed to be probing, testing, looking for something that Jackson couldn't quite identify yet. "So, Sam, I've got to ask you about something that's been making waves on social media," Kimmel said, pulling out a stack of printed papers. "There are some pretty serious allegations being thrown around about your behavior on the set of your latest film." Jackson's eyebrows raised slightly. This wasn't what his publicist had told him they'd be discussing. "What kind of allegations, Jimmy?" "Well, according to several unnamed sources," Kimmel continued, his voice taking on an almost prosecutorial tone, "you apparently had multiple outbursts, used inappropriate language with crew members, and created what some are calling a hostile work environment." The studio audience fell silent. This wasn't the light-hearted entertainment they'd come for. Jackson leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from relaxed to guarded in an instant. "Unnamed sources," Jackson repeated slowly. "That's interesting. Jimmy, you know what I find fascinating about unnamed sources? They can say absolutely anything they want without having to back it up." Kimmel's smile widened, but it wasn't friendly anymore. It was predatory. "But surely where there's smoke, there's fire, right? I mean, these reports are coming from multiple outlets." "Multiple outlets reporting the same unsubstantiated garbage," Jackson shot back, his voice remaining controlled, but with an edge creeping in. "You know, Jimmy, I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've worked with hundreds of directors, thousands of crew members, and I've built my reputation on professionalism and respect. So when someone sits across from me and tries to ambush me with tabloid gossip disguised as legitimate journalism, I start to wonder what their real agenda is." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Audience members were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that something was going very wrong with what should have been a fun celebrity interview. Kimmel leaned forward, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. "I'm just asking the questions that people want answered, Sam. Isn't that what journalism is about?" "Journalism?" Jackson's voice rose slightly, though he maintained his composure. "Is that what we're calling this? Because last time I checked, real journalists verify their sources before they try to destroy someone's reputation on national television." "I'm not trying to destroy anything," Kimmel replied with mock innocence. "I'm just trying to get to the truth." "The truth?" Jackson laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is that this is exactly the kind of cheap shot, ratings-driven, Nonsense that's turning legitimate entertainment into a circus. You invited me here under false pretenses, Jimmy. Your people told my people this was going to be about my new film, about my foundation work, about the things I'm actually passionate about. Instead, you're trying to turn me into your personal punching bag for some twisted idea of entertainment. Kimmel's mask was starting to slip. The fake concern was being replaced by something uglier, something that suggested this attack had been planned from the beginning. Look, Sam, if you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Tough questions? Jackson's control was starting to fray around the edges. There's a difference between tough questions and character assassination, Jimmy. A tough question would be asking me about the challenges of playing a particular role, or how I prepare for difficult scenes, or what advice I have for young actors. What you're doing is taking unverified gossip and presenting it as fact, hoping I'll get rattled enough to say something stupid that you can turn into a viral moment. The audience was completely silent now, many of them looking around nervously, as if wondering whether they should leave. This wasn't entertainment anymore, it was a public execution, and Samuel L. Jackson was fighting for his professional life. I think you're being a little dramatic, Kimmel said, his tone now openly condescending. These are legitimate concerns that have been raised by people in the industry. Legitimate concerns? Jackson's voice was rising now, his famous intensity, starting to break through his professional facade. Show me one person willing to put their name behind these so-called concerns. Show me one credible source, one piece of actual evidence, one anything that proves I've ever behaved unprofessionally, on any set, anywhere, at any time in my career. Kimmel shuffled his papers dramatically, clearly stalling. Well, as I said, these sources requested anonymity for obvious reasons. Obvious reasons like they don't exist? Jackson shot back. Like maybe you and your writers cooked this whole thing up in your little writer's room because you thought it would be fun to take down Samuel L. Jackson? Because you thought the audience would love to see me squirm? Now you're just being paranoid, Kimmel replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Now, the hunter was becoming the hunted, and everyone in the studio could feel the shift. Paranoid? Jackson leaned forward in his chair, his eyes locked on Kimmel's. Let me tell you something about paranoia, Jimmy. Paranoia is when you think people are out to get you for no reason. What's happening here isn't paranoia. This is a calculated attack, and the only question is why. The studio atmosphere had shifted completely. What started as a routine celebrity interview had transformed into something far more sinister, and Samuel L. Jackson was done playing games. His eyes never left Kimmel's face as he continued speaking, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades in Hollywood. You want to know what I think this is really about, Jimmy? I think this is about you feeling small. I think this is about you sitting behind that desk every night, making jokes about people who actually create things, who actually take risks, who actually put themselves on the line for their art. And maybe, just maybe, you got tired of being the guy who comments on other people's lives and decided you wanted to try to destroy one instead. Kimmel's face flushed red. That's completely ridiculous. I'm just doing my job. Your job? Jackson's laugh was sharp and bitter. Your job is to entertain people, not to spread lies and destroy reputations. Your job is to celebrate the work that artists do, not to tear them down based on made-up stories from invisible sources. Look, Sam, I understand you're upset, but these allegations came to us through legitimate channels, Kimmel insisted, though his voice was becoming increasingly defensive. Legitimate channels? Jackson stood up from his chair, towering over the desk. The studio audience gasped collectively. Name one channel, Jimmy. Give me one name, one publication, one single person who's willing to go on record with these accusations. Kimmel fumbled with his papers again, clearly stalling for time. As I've explained, these sources require protection. Protection from what? From having to tell the truth? From having to back up their lies with actual facts? Jackson's voice, was building to the kind of intensity that had made him famous in films like Pulp Fiction and Snakes on a Plane. Because let me tell you something about the truth, Jimmy. The truth doesn't need protection. The truth doesn't hide behind anonymity. The truth stands up and speaks for itself. You're really overreacting here, Kimmel said, but his confidence was crumbling. It's just a conversation. A conversation? Jackson's eyes blazed. A conversation is when two people exchange ideas with mutual respect. What you're doing is an ambush. What you're doing is character assassination. What you're doing is taking a man who's spent his entire career building something meaningful and trying to tear it down for your own sick entertainment. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. The studio audience was transfixed, many of them clearly uncomfortable but unable to look away. "I think you need to calm down," Kimmel said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Calm down?" Jackson's voice rose to a roar. "You invite me onto your show under false pretenses. You ambush me with lies and fabricated stories. You try to destroy my reputation in front of millions of people. And then you tell me to calm down? Who the hell do you think you are?" "I'm the host of this show," Kimmel replied, his own temper finally starting to show. "And I'll ask whatever questions I want to ask." "And I'm Samuel L. Jackson," came the thunderous reply. "I've been making movies since before you were even a punchline on late-night television. I've worked with Spike Lee, Quentin Tarantino, George Lucas, Marvel Studios, and directors you couldn't even dream of meeting. I've created characters that will be remembered long after your little talk show is canceled and forgotten. So don't you dare sit there and think you can intimidate me with your cheap theatrics and your fake authority." Kimmel's mask was completely off now. The friendly late-night host persona had been replaced by something petty and vindictive. "Maybe if you weren't so arrogant, people wouldn't be talking about how difficult you are to work with." "Arrogant?" Jackson's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You think confidence in my abilities, pride in my work, and respect for my craft makes me arrogant? Let me tell you what arrogance is, Jimmy. Arrogance is thinking you can destroy someone's career based on gossip. Arrogance is believing you have the right to ambush a guest who trusted you enough to come on your show. Arrogance is assuming that your audience is too stupid to see what you're really doing here." "What am I really doing?" Kimmel challenged, leaning back in his chair with false bravado. "You're trying to create a viral moment at my expense. You're hoping I lose my temper completely so you can have a clip that gets shared 1,000,000 times with headlines about Samuel L. Jackson having a meltdown. You're counting on the fact that most people won't pay attention to why I got angry. They'll just see the anger itself and assume there must be some truth to your lies." The accuracy of Jackson's assessment hit Kimmel like a physical blow. For just a moment, his composure cracked completely, and the calculated nature of his attack was visible to everyone in the studio. "But here's what you didn't count on," Jackson continued, his voice now controlled but seething with barely contained fury. "You didn't count on me being smart enough to see through your game. You didn't count on me having enough self-respect to fight back. And you sure as hell didn't count on me being articulate enough to explain to your audience exactly what kind of person you really are." "This is getting way out of hand," Kimmel said, looking toward his producers off camera. "Maybe we should take a commercial break." "Oh no," Jackson said firmly. "We're not taking any breaks. You started this, Jimmy, and now we're going to finish it. You wanted Samuel L. Jackson on your show? Well, congratulations, you've got him. The real Samuel L. Jackson, not the polite, media-trained version who sits quietly while people try to destroy his reputation." The studio was electric with tension. Every person in that room knew they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that would be talked about for years to come. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? It's not that you tried to ambush me. It's not even that you based your attack on lies and rumors. The real tragedy is that you had Samuel L. Jackson sitting right across from you, and instead of using that opportunity to create something meaningful, something entertaining, something that your audience would actually enjoy. You chose to turn it into this ugly spectacle. Kimmel tried one more time to regain control. Look, Sam, if you could just answer the questions. I did answer your questions, Jimmy. I told you they were lies. I told you your sources don't exist. I told you that in 30 years of professional acting, I've never once behaved the way you're suggesting I behave. But that's not the answer you wanted, is it? You wanted me to break down, to confess to things I never did, to give you the kind of dramatic confession that would make your career. The host's desperation was becoming more obvious by the second. I'm just trying to do my job here. No, Jimmy. Your job is to entertain people. Your job is to make them laugh, to make them feel good, to give them a break from the troubles in their own lives. What you're doing right now isn't entertainment. It's cruelty. It's the kind of mean-spirited garbage that makes people lose faith in humanity. Jackson wasn't finished. The legendary actor had found his rhythm now, and he was systematically destroying every aspect of Kimmel's ambush with surgical precision. The host was visibly sweating under the studio lights, his carefully planned attack crumbling before his eyes. You want to know what's really pathetic about this whole situation, Jimmy? You had the chance to have a real conversation with someone who's lived through the evolution of Hollywood, who's worked with legends, who's seen the industry change from the inside. Instead, you chose to waste everyone's time with tabloid trash, because you thought it would get you better ratings. Kimmel's jaw tightened. The ratings for this show speak for themselves. Do they? Jackson's smile was razor-sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're getting pretty desperate for attention. Why else would you resort to this kind of cheap ambush journalism? Why else would you risk destroying your relationship with every major talent agency in Hollywood just to try to embarrass one actor? I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, Kimmel protested weakly. Really? Then what would you call it when you invite someone onto your show and then spend the entire interview trying to convince your audience that they're a terrible person based on completely unverified claims? Jackson leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper that had terrified audiences in countless films. Because I can tell you what the rest of Hollywood is going to call it. They're going to call it career suicide. The color drained from Kimmel's face as the implications of Jackson's words sank in. In his eagerness to create a viral moment, he hadn't considered the long-term consequences of alienating one of the most respected actors in the industry. You think this ends when the cameras stop rolling, Jimmy? You think tomorrow morning everyone's just going to forget that you tried to destroy Samuel L. Jackson's reputation based on lies? Let me explain something to you about this business. Reputation is everything. Trust is everything. And tonight you've shown everyone in Hollywood that you can't be trusted. Now hold on, Kimmel stammered, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. No, you hold on, Jackson interrupted, his voice building to another crescendo. You hold on while I explain to you and your audience exactly what kind of person does what you've done tonight. The kind of person who invites a guest into their home because that's what this is supposed to be, a welcoming space, and then tries to humiliate them for sport. The studio audience was completely silent, many of them looking ashamed to be witnessing this public execution. They had come for laughs and celebrity gossip, not to watch their host's reputation get systematically destroyed. I've been on talk shows for decades, Jimmy. I've sat across from Carson, Letterman, Leno, Conan, Ellen, Oprah, and dozens of others. Some of them asked tough questions. Some of them challenged me. But every single one of them did it with respect, with preparation, and with actual facts to back up their questions. What you've done tonight is beneath all of them. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Look, Sam, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over and talk about your new project? Jackson's laugh was cold and humorless. Start over? You think you can just pretend the last 20 minutes didn't happen? You think you can try to destroy someone's career and then just change the subject when it doesn't work out the way you planned? I wasn't trying to destroy anything, Kimmel insisted, but his voice lacked any conviction. Then what were you trying to do? Enlighten me, Jimmy. Explain to me and everyone watching what your goal was when you decided to ambush me with made-up stories about my professional conduct. Kimmel sat in silence, clearly unable to provide any answer that wouldn't make him look worse than he already did. That's what I thought, Jackson said with disgust. You don't have an answer because there is no good answer. There's no justification for what you've done here tonight. You violated the basic trust that exists between host and guest. You lied to my representatives about what this interview would be about. You attempted to damage my reputation based on nothing more than gossip and speculation. And worst of all, you did it all for your own entertainment. The tension in the studio was reaching a breaking point. Jackson was standing now, towering over Kimmel's desk like an avenging angel of Hollywood justice. You know what the really sad part is, Jimmy? Your audience deserves better than this. They came here tonight expecting to be entertained, to laugh, to maybe learn something interesting about movies or acting or the entertainment business. Instead, you gave them this ugly spectacle because you thought it would be more exciting than actual entertainment. Kimmel finally snapped. You know what, Sam? I don't have to sit here and listen to this. This is my show, and if you don't like how I run it, you can leave. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jackson stared at Kimmel for a long moment, then slowly nodded. You're absolutely right, Jimmy. This is your show, and you've just shown everyone exactly what kind of show it really is. Jackson straightened his jacket and looked directly into the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here tonight expecting to have a conversation about my work, about the projects I'm passionate about the things that matter to me as an artist and as a person. Instead, I was ambushed by a host who thought it would be fun to try to destroy my reputation based on lies. Security, Kimmel called out, his voice cracking with humiliation and rage. You don't need security, Jimmy, Jackson said calmly. I'm leaving. But before I go, I want everyone watching to understand what they just witnessed. This wasn't journalism. This wasn't entertainment. This was a failed attempt at character assassination by someone who mistook cruelty for cleverness. Two security guards appeared at the edge of the stage, looking uncertain about whether they should actually escort out one of Hollywood's biggest stars. I'll save you the trouble, Jackson said, walking toward the exit. He stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back to face Kimmel one last time. You know, Jimmy, I've played a lot of bad guys in my movies, but I've never met anyone in real life who was as petty, as vindictive, and as cowardly as you've shown yourself to be tonight. Get him out of here, Kimmel shouted, his composure completely shattered. Jackson smiled one last cold smile. I'm already gone, Jimmy, but the damage you've done to yourself tonight, that's going to last a lot longer than my walk to the parking lot. With that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage with the same dignity and grace he had brought to countless movie roles. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, many of them clearly uncomfortable with what they had just witnessed. Kimmel sat behind his desk, his face red with embarrassment and fury, knowing that he had just made one of the biggest mistakes of his career. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of his humiliation as he tried desperately to figure out how to end the show after losing his guest in such spectacular fashion. The confrontation was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Samuel L. Jackson had been kicked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live show, but in the process, he had exposed the host's true character to millions of viewers. The question now was whether Kimmel's career could survive the damage he had inflicted on himself in his failed attempt to take down one of Hollywood's most respected actors. So what do you think really motivated Jimmy Kimmel to launch such a vicious attack on Samuel L. Jackson? Was this a calculated ratings grab that backfired spectacularly? Or was there something deeper driving his need to try to humiliate such a respected figure? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible Stories from behind the scenes of Hollywood. The entertainment industry is full of shocking moments like this, and we'll keep bringing you the stories that show what really happens when the cameras are rolling and the gloves come off.